Welcome, dear listeners, to the shadow behind you, the sanctuary where the veiled secrets of yesteryear emerge from their graves, clawing through the soil of forgotten memories to grasp at the living. I am your guide through these murky depths, the sentinel who heeds the spectral calls that echo through time's corridors. Tonight, we descend into the labyrinthine wilderness of the Missouri Ozarks in 1890, a realm where the very ground pulses with unspoken maledictions, and the air is thick with the residue of vanished souls. Our chronicle unveils the haunting curse of the Wanderer Sisters, a dark history erased from time, a saga so profound in its terror that it defies the boundaries of mere storytelling, seeping into the listener's subconscious like ink bleeding through parchment. Envision, if you dare, the Ozarks as they existed in that fateful year, an untamed mosaic of precipitous limestone, escarpments, impenetrable thickets of gnarled oak, hickory, and pine that seemed to conspire against the sky, and serpentine waterways such as the White River and the Norfolk carving through the terrain like arteries of some colossal, slumbering entity. The atmosphere is oppressive, laden with the musty aroma of sodden earth, the pungent decay of fallen foliage, and the subtle, biting smoke from isolated hearths that flicker like wary eyes in the gloom. As twilight descends, it envelopes the land in a pall of darkness, the moon's pallid glow birthing ethereal phantoms across the undulating hills, while the zephyrs murmur through the boughs, bearing fragments of archaic laments or the faint, chilling cadence of sobs long silenced. In this cradle of seclusion, human endeavors wrestled with nature's indifference. Pioneers etched meager existences from the recalcitrant soil, their lives interwoven with the cycles of harvest and hardship. Yet, beneath this veneer of rustic perseverance lurked the vestiges of primordial beliefs, superstitions that clung like burrs to every homespun garment and fervent supplication. Families evaporated into obscurity, their lineages desiccated like vines succumbed to winter's grasp, and venerable establishments crumbled under burdens unseen. But no narrative rivals the macabre enigma of the Wanderer Sisters in its capacity to instill dread. Allow me to unfurl this tableau with deliberate languor, permitting the frigidity to infiltrate your essence, much like the insidious frost that claims the unwary traveler. It is the cusp of autumn in 1890, the foliage ablaze in crimson and amber, fracturing underfoot with a resonance akin to shattering osseous matter, nestled in a secluded dell proximate to the erstwhile vitality of Ozark, Missouri, a locale now relegated to spectral reminiscence, its judicial edifice and taverns dissolving into mythos, resides a dilapidated abode. Verdant moss adheres to its timbers like suppurating lesions, and the flue expels wisps of vapor that contort defiantly against the breeze. Within dwell the triad Eliza, the matriarch at 35, her gaze reminiscent of tempestuous cumulonimbi, her palms indurated from nocturnal excavations of rhizomes; Abigail, the intermediary at 28, whose timber could assuage a virulent ague or evoke a cataclysm; and Clara, the neophyte at 22, whose somnolent reveries permeated the corporeal portents that rendered her quivering in the nascent luminescence. They were dubbed the Wanderer Sisters, not for peripatetic inclinations, but in homage to their surname's evocation of the itinerant apparitions reputed to traverse these prominences, specters of indigenous clans dispossessed epochs prior, or transatlantic migrants who dissipated amid the grand exoduses of the nascent 19th century. Their progenitors hailed from antiquated realms, laden with repositories of prescribed erudition, botanical arcana from the Caledonian uplands, invocations intuned in Teutonic vernaculars, and the rhythmic essences of African cadences borne by fugitives into these untamed expanses. However, in the Ozarks, such erudition wielded a bifurcated edge. To the afflicted, the sisters were panaceas, matronly sages who concocted infusions from indigenous flora to facilitate parturition or dispel pyrexia. To the apprehensive, they embodied sorcery, fraternizing with infernal entities in the sylvan abysses, their imprecations as efficacious as the ethereal luminescence that cavorted along Hornet's rutted thoroughfares. The essence that ensnares the psyche in this narrative transcends the atrocity inflicted upon them. It resides in the systematic obliteration of their ontology from the annals of existence, archives in the municipal repository, natal certifications, territorial entitlements, even ephemeral notations in antiquated gazettes, evanesced like vapor at aurora. Kin who uttered their appellations discovered their articulations impeded, their recollections obfuscated. It appears as though the terrain itself orchestrated their expungement, a malediction that persists into our contemporary epoch of 2025, wherein perambulators in those identical elevations recount auditory hallucinations of subdued lamentations or silhouettes that replicate their perambulations with uncanny fidelity. What provoked their malediction? Or were they the architects of maledictions? Herein lies the allure that inexorably draws you inward, the ambiguity, the trepidation that perchance their umbra trails you even as you attend. As we penetrate further, sense the ambience congeal. The Ozarks of 1890 constituted a crucible of advancement and jeopardy. Iron pathways commenced their incursion upon the vista, ferrying mercantilism to enclaves like Ozark Municipality. Yet in the sequestered depressions, existence adhered to lunar phases and seasonal vicissitudes. Credulities dominated, a sable feline intersecting one's trajectory necessitated recommencement, lest Lucifer appropriate one's anema. Disseminated saline beckon malevolence, mitigated solely by a dispersal over the sinister scapula. And enchantresses, they were tangible, or so the montane denizens professed, females akin to the wanderers, versed in amphibian ossis ceremonies or capable of propelling argent projectiles toward the celestial orb to forge compacts with obscurity, depict the sorority on a nebulous vesper. Eliza inclines over a cauldron, agitating a decoction redolent of matricaria and an acerbity akin to sulphurous mineral. Abigail intones delicately, her lexicon distorting the ether. Clara fixates upon the conflagration, her orbs vitreous as epiphanies assail her. Lineages subsumed into chasms like the infernal abyss, abyssal voids that engulfed ululations entirely. A sojourner materializes at their threshold, frantic, imputing them with bewitching his progeny. His oculi frenzied, he articulates a malediction that effaces pedigrees, bequeathing merely vacuous resonances. This transcends a spectral anecdote, auditors. It constitutes an immersion into the nadir of interred anguish, where the demarcation betwixt verity and mythos diffuses like the haze over vernal rivulet. As we advance, you'll perceive the escalation of suspense, the ether chilia, the penumbra elongate. What malediction afflicted the wanderers? How did it excise them from chronology? And why do their suzerations yet torment the Ozark scales? Abide with me, for in exhuming this, we may rouse an entity optimally consigned to dormancy. The chronicle inaugurates with a percussion upon the portal on a nocturnal when the luna conceals its countenance. But ere we embark, contemplate the broader tableau. The Ozarks, in their isolation, fostered a unique amalgamation of cultures. Scotch-Irish settlers introduced ballads laden with supernatural themes, tales of fairies and banshees adapted to the American wilderness. German immigrants brought hex signs and pow-wow healing, blending Christian prayer with pagan rites. African-American influences added rootwork, using herbs and mojo bags for protection or harm. This syncretism created a fertile ground for legends like the Wanderers. Moreover, the era was marked by social upheavals. The post-Civil War reconstruction left scars, bushwhacker raids, family feuds that spanned generations. Economic strife from timber booms and busts led to blame shifting, with witches often scapegoated for misfortunes. The Wanderers, as independent women without husbands, were particularly vulnerable, embodying the fear of the other in a patriarchal society. Now, as the thunder draws nearer, let's step into the story proper. The knock echoes and the door creaks open. It was the autumn of 1890, in the shadowed valleys of the Missouri Ozarks, where the sun struggled to pierce the canopy of ancient oaks that stood like sentinels guarding forbidden secrets. The air was thick with the scent of rotting leaves, the sharp bite of pine resin, and the faint, metallic tang of impending rain that hung like a promise of doom. Thunder rumbled far off, like the earth's own uneasy breath, vibrating through the ground and stirring the leaves in a restless dance. in a forgotten hollow near the remnants of Windyville, a place already whispering of ghosts with its abandoned cannery where echoes of workers' screams seemed to linger in the rusting machinery, and lonely cemeteries where headstones tilted like drunken revelers stood the Wanderer cabin. Built from logs hewn by their fathers' hands decades earlier during the Great Migrations of the 1840s, it squatted low against the hillside, its roof sagging under the weight of creeping vines that seemed to pulse with a life of their own, as if the forest was slowly reclaiming what was once stolen from it. Eliza Wanderer, the eldest at 35, was the pillar of the trio, a woman forged in the fires of hardship. Her hair, black as raven feathers glistening in the moonlight, was tied back with a strip of leather adorned with small charms, dried acorns and hawk feathers for protection. Her eyes, dark and piercing, held the wisdom of generations, and her hands bore the scars of countless foragings. Pricks from thorns that guarded secret herbs, burns from hot poultices applied to the dying, and coluses from wielding tools that bridged the natural and supernatural worlds. She was the Yarb doctor, the one villagers sought in secret for remedies that no city physician, with their bottles of laudanum and leeches, could match. Her knowledge was vast. She knew the phases of the moon for planting healing gardens, the signs in the stars for divining illness, and the hidden springs where water held curative properties. Abigail, 28, was the voice of the sisters, her tones melodic yet laced with an undercurrent of storm that could turn soothing words into weapons. She moved with a grace that belied her strength, her auburn hair cascading like a waterfall over shoulders marked by faint tattoos. Symbols from old grimoires meant to bind spirits. Her gift was in the songs she wove, humming tunes passed down from their mother that could calm a colicky babe, with lullabies infused with lavender essence or stir unrest in a man's heart with dissonant melodies that echoed the cries of owls in the night. Abigail's voice could heal wounds of the soul, mending broken hearts with ballads of lost love or cursing betrayers with whispers that planted seeds of doubt and paranoia. Clara, the youngest at 22, was the seer, her pale eyes often distant, as if gazing into realms beyond the veil, where the living and dead mingled freely. Her skin was fair, almost translucent, marked by freckles that formed patterns she interpreted as omens. She spent her days sketching visions that plagued her nights, nightmares that bled into waking hours, leaving her trembling and feverish. Clara's dreams were portals. She saw past events replayed in vivid detail, future calamities unfolding like tragic plays, and the hidden truths of those who came seeking aid. Her sensitivity made her the most vulnerable, but also the most powerful, for she could foresee dangers and weave protections accordingly. Their days were a rhythm of survival and secrecy, a delicate balance between aiding the community and hiding their true nature. Dawn found Eliza in the woods, basket in hand, harvesting roots under the waning moon when their power was strongest. Mandrake for easing pain during childbirth, blackberry leaves for soothing labor pains, cedar berries for those desperate women who sought to end what grew within before it could bring shame or hardship. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustle of leaves, like whispers of ancient spirits, the snap of twigs under unseen feet that could be deer or something more sinister, the distant hoot of owls calling warnings. She moved with caution, for the Ozarks held perils beyond beasts. Legends spoke of the Blue Man, a hulking figure from the mid-19th century who hurled boulders at intruders with supernatural strength, or the Spook Light of Hornet, a fiery orb that danced erratically, luring travelers astray into bottomless pits where their bones would never be found. Abigail tended the hearth inside the cabin, her chants mingling with the crackle of flames that cast dancing shadows on the walls adorned with dried herbs and talismans. She prepared salves from beeswax and elderflower, teas from willow bark for fever, but her true gift was in the words, the incantations that bound or broke bonds. What I see increase, what I rub decrease, she'd murmur over a boil, her finger tracing invisible circles on the afflicted skin, drawing out the poison with a pull that felt like magic but was rooted in ancestral knowledge. Villagers came at dusk, slipping through the shadows like ghosts themselves, paying with sacks of cornmeal, hanks of wool, or sometimes nothing but gratitude whispered in fear. But not all visits were benign. Whispers grew in the nearby settlements, fueled by the era's deep-seated superstitions and the church's warnings against heathen ways. A cow that gave bloody milk, clearly the wanderers doing a hex for unpaid debts. A churn that yielded no butter despite hours of labor. Their malice at work, punishing gossip. Clara, fragile yet fierce in her quiet way, spent hours by the window, her sketchbook filled with charcoal drawings of her visions, haunting images of families vanishing into mists, their cries fading into silence. She dreamed of the Holloways in 1860, a clan who disappeared one brutal winter, leaving only empty cabins with meals half eaten on tables and frozen footprints leading to nowhere but oblivion. Or the Prutes in 1776, swallowed by the hills during the chaos of the American Revolution, their homesteads reclaimed by vines as if they never existed. These dreams left her sweating, her screams echoing through the cabin like banshee wails that set the dogs howling in distant farms. The sisters would comfort her, Eliza with strong arms and herbal teas, Abigail with soothing songs, but they knew Clara's gifts were both blessing and curse, a double-edged sword that cut deep. The inciting shadow fell on a stormy evening in October, when the wind howled like a chorus of tormented souls, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers tapping for entry. Rain lashed the earth in sheets, turning paths to mud that sucked at boots like hungry mouths. A knock thudded against the door. Heavy, insistent, cutting through the storm's roar. Eliza, ever the guardian, opened it cautiously, revealing a stranger, rain-slicked and wild-eyed, his face gaunt under a sodden hat. He was Silas Thorne, a traveler from the east, perhaps Boston or Philadelphia, his coat tattered from miles of rough travel, boots caked in mud that smelled of distant rivers and desperation. "Help me, for God's sake," he gasped, collapsing across the threshold, bringing the chill of the night inside with him. His story spilled out in ragged breaths, punctuated by coughs that rattled his frame. His family, wife Amelia, son Jacob aged 10, and daughter Lily just 6, had vanished 3 nights prior while camping in a nearby hollow during their journey west to seek fortune in the mines. One moment, laughter around the campfire, stories of new beginnings; the next, utter silence, their tents empty, belongings scattered as if in haste, footprints erased by an unnatural fog that rolled in like a living entity. Thorne's eyes, red, rimmed from tears or madness, darted around the cabin, fixing on the shelves lined with jars of herbs, dried toads for potions, and bones used in divinations. "You're the witches they speak of in Ozark Town! You cursed them, took them for your dark rituals?" he accused, his voice rising to a fever pitch. Eliza's calm demeanor cracked only slightly, a flicker in her storm cloud eyes. "We heal, not harm," she replied evenly, but Thorne lunged forward in his delirium, knocking over a cauldron on the hearth. Steam rose in a hissing cloud, carrying the scent of chamomile and something bitter, like curse, root harvested under a blood moon. The brew spilled across the floorboards, soaking into the wood like blood into earth. As Abigail restrained him with surprising strength, her hands gripping his arms like vices forged in fire, Clara's eyes glazed over, her body stiffening as a vision seized her in its grip. She saw Thorne's family not vanished by accident, but drawn into a sinkhole by luminous orbs akin to the spook light, glowing with an otherworldly allure. But deeper, beneath the surface, she glimpsed Thorne's hidden truth. He had argued with his wife over money, struck her in a fit of rage born from frustration and alcohol, and the children had fled into the night in terror. The vanishing was his guilt manifested, a psychological torment twisted by the land's magic, but he blamed the supernatural, the outsiders, the women who dared to live without men. The confrontation escalated like a storm building to its peak. Thorne drew a hidden knife from his boot, its blade glinting in the firelight, and slashed at Abigail's arm, drawing a line of blood that dripped to the floor with a sizzle, as if the wood itself recoiled. "Devil's whores!" he roared, his face contorted in righteous fury. The sisters subdued him, Eliza striking him with her staff, Abigail binding his wrists with ropes woven from enchanted vines that tightened with his struggles, Clara whispering words that clouded his mind. But the damage was done, irreversible as spilled blood. As they tended Abigail's wound with poultices of comfrey and spider silk for binding, Clara whispered urgently, "Hail, bring others." The curse awakens within him, spreading like poison ivy through the veins of the community. That night, under a moonless sky where stars hid behind clouds like frightened witnesses, the sisters gathered in their ritual circle behind the cabin, a ring of stones etched with symbols from old grimoires smuggled from Europe, symbols for protection, for power, for vengeance. Eliza lit a fire with brimstone matches that flared blue, the flames casting grotesque shadows that danced like demons on the trees. Abigail chanted the Lord's Prayer backwards, her voice reversing the flow of the air, causing leaves to swirl in defiance of the wind. Clara, trembling but resolute, performed the initiation rite she'd long resisted, loading a pistol with a silver bullet forged in their hearth, firing it at the hidden moon while uttering obscene invocations in a language forgotten by all but the initiated. Power surged through them, a cold wind whipping the leaves into a vortex, the ground trembling as if the earth approved. Thorn, still bound and gagged in the cabin, watched through the window in horror, his eyes wide as saucers. "What are you?" he whimpered when they returned, the gag removed. Eliza's eyes darkened to abyssal depths. "We are the wanderers, guardians of the forgotten ways. But you have awakened the curse of Erasure, and it will consume all who stand against us." As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of blood and gold, Thorn fled into the fading storm. But not before the sisters whispered a binding spell into his ear, words that would compel him to spread tales while planting the seeds of his own undoing. He would rally the fearful, drawing a mob like moths to a flame, but the curse clung to him like a shadow, ensuring his words would twist back upon themselves. Days passed in mounting dread, the air growing heavier with anticipation. Whispers reached the sisters from sympathetic villagers, a midwife who owed them her child's life, a farmer whose crop they had saved from blight. Thorn was in Ozark, drinking in saloons, recounting exaggerated tales of devil pacts and vanished kin, his voice fueled by whiskey and wrath. The sisters' dreams intensified. Clara saw the mob coming in vivid detail, torches like stars fallen to earth, pitchforks gleaming like reapers' scythes. Abigail felt the curse stirring in her blood, a legacy from their grandmother who had hexed a whole settlement in the 1850s during a famine, erasing its name from maps and memories alike. One evening, as rain lashed the windows like accusing fingers drumming for justice, a lone figure approached through the downpour. Not Thorn, but a young girl from a nearby farm, no more than 12, her dress soaked, her face pale with fever and fear. "My brother's gone," she sobbed, collapsing into Eliza's arms. Vanished in the woods while gathering firewood. Eliza examined her, sensing the curse's spread like a disease. The girl's family had spoken ill of the wanderers at a town meeting. Now the erasure began, tendrils reaching out to claim the innocent as well as the guilty. The sisters treated the girl with a tonic of feverfew and elderberry, but as she slept by the fire, they conferred in hushed tones. "The curse is loose," Abigail said, her voice a melody of sorrow. "It will not distinguish friend from foe." Clara nodded, her eyes distant. "I see more coming, families splintered, names forgotten. We must prepare." They spent the night fortifying their home, nailing horseshoes above every entrance to repel evil, painting haint blue on the shutters to confuse spirits, burying witch bottles filled with nails, pins, and their own urine at the four corners of the property to trap incoming hexes. Eliza brewed potions that smelled of decay and power. Abigail knotted cords with curses woven into each twist, cords that could lame horses, blind eyes, or still tongues. Clara drew protective sigils on the floorboards, symbols that glowed faintly in the candlelight. The part closes on a cliffhanger. Distant torchlight flickering on the horizon through the rain, the mob approaching like an inevitable tide. The sisters stand united at the door, their chants rising against the storm, the air thick with the promise of haunting retribution and the scent of impending doom. The wind carries their words, twisting them into warnings for any who dare listen. The mob descended like a plague upon the wanderer hollow, their torches cutting through the night like fiery claws rending the darkness. It was mid-October 1890, the air crisp with frost that bit at exposed skin like invisible teeth, carrying the scent of burning pine pitch and the sour sweat of unwashed fury mingled with fear. Thunder still grumbled in the distance, a counterpoint to the stamping feet and muttered oaths. Silas Thorne led them, 24 men from Ozark and the surrounding farms, a ragtag assembly of farmers, loggers, and shopkeepers armed with rifles loaded with silver bullets for witches, pitchforks sharpened to points, and crucifixes clutched like talismans. Their breaths puffed like specters in the cold, voices murmuring prayers from the Bible mixed with curses learned in taverns. "Burn the witches! Cleanse the land!" one shouted, his words echoing off the bluffs like a challenge to the spirits. Inside the cabin, the sisters waited in tense silence, the air heavy with the aroma of protective incense, sage and frankincense burning in a brass bowl. Eliza had barred the door with a heavy iron beam, horseshoes nailed above to ward off evil, though tonight the evil wore human faces twisted by ignorance. Abigail's wound throbbed under its bandage, wrapped in cloth soaked in a reversal potion made from rue and vervain, but she hummed a protective tune under her breath, the notes weaving an invisible barrier that shimmered like heat haze. Clara, pale as moonlight filtering through cracks, clutched a witch bottle tightly, a jar filled with bent nails, thorns from blackberry brambles, and their combined urine, to trap any incoming hexes or malevolent intentions. The first assault came with a barrage of stones thudding against the walls, splintering wood and shattering a window in a cascade of glass that tinkled like malevolent laughter. "Come out, devil spawn! Face God's judgment," Torn bellowed, his voice hoarse from shouting in the rain. Eliza peered through a narrow crack in the shutters, her eyes meeting his across the distance, locking in a battle of wills. In that moment, she whispered a curse under her breath. "As you seek to erase us from this world, so shall you be erased. From memory, from the earth, from the very fabric of time." The words carried on the wind, unnatural and chilling, causing several men to shiver as if a ghost had brushed their spines. Chaos erupted like a dam breaking. A man, burly and bearded, fired a shot from his rifle, the bullet embedding in the door with a thunk that vibrated through the cabin. Abigail retaliated swiftly, her fingers flying over a cord of red wool, tying knots with precision, each twist a curse on their limbs, their sight, their courage. One attacker stumbled suddenly, his legs failing as if bound by invisible ropes, collapsing to the mud with a cry. Another clutched his eyes, screaming that shadows had blinded him. Clara, her heart pounding, hurled the witch bottle through the broken window. It shattered at Thorne's feet in a spray of shards and foul liquid, releasing an odor like rotten eggs and decay that made men gag and retch, visions of their own gruesome deaths flashing before their eyes, drowned in sinkholes, withered by age, forgotten by loved ones. The door gave way under repeated blows from axes, wood splintering like bones breaking, and the mob surged in, a wave of hatred and fear. The sisters fought with everything they had, a whirlwind of defense in the confined space. Eliza wielded her staff, carved from ancient oak and inscribed with runes, striking with precision born of years in the forest. Cracking knees, disarming hands, her movements fluid like a dance with death. Abigail's voice rose in a banshee wail, a high-pitched keen that disoriented the intruders. Some clutched their ears, blood trickling from ruptured drums, others staggered as if drunk. Clara, drawing on her visions, predicted their strikes, dodging like a shadow slipping through fingers, her small knife flashing to slash at tendons and wrists. But numbers overwhelmed them, the cabin filling with the stench of sweat and blood. Thorne grabbed Clara by the hair, yanking her back, his knife pressed to her throat, the cold steel biting into skin. "Confess your pacts with Satan! Admit your sins before we send you to hell!" he demanded. his breath hot and reeking of whiskey. Clara, eyes wide but defiant, spat in his face. "Our pact is with the land, with the spirits of the dispossessed, not your fabricated devil. You are the monsters here." In desperation, as axes swung and gunfire echoed, the sisters linked hands amid the melee, forming a circle of power even as men tried to pull them apart. They chanted in unison, a rite from their grandmother's forbidden book, invoking the erasure curse with words that made the air hum and vibrate. The atmosphere thickened palpably, fog rolling in from the woods unnaturally, dense and cloying, swallowing sounds and light. The torches flickered and dimmed, casting elongated shadows that seemed to come alive. One by one, the mob faltered, the curse taking hold in waves of horror. A young farmer vanished into the mist with a gasp, his scream cut short as if the fog devoured him whole. Another aged before their horrified eyes, wrinkles etching his face like time accelerated, hair whitening, body shriveling until he crumbled to dust on the floor, a pile of bones and cloth. A third clutched his throat, gasping as memories fled his mind. Names of his children, his wife's face, his own identity, erased in an instant of agony. Thorn released Clara, staggering back, horror dawning on his features as he saw his comrades fall. "What have you done? What unholy power is this?" The curse unfolded in relentless waves, the sisters, bound by blood and will, channeling the Ozarks' ancient spirits, the displaced Cherokee whose trails of tears soaked the soil, the vanished settlers whose graves were unmarked. Eliza drew a circle in the dirt with her own blood, dripping from a cut on her palm, sealing the ritual with a final incantation. Abigail recited the Lord's Prayer backwards thrice, summoning winds that extinguished the remaining torches, plunging the cabin into darkness lit only by the hearth's embers. Clara envisioned the outcome, her seer's gift amplifying the spell, the mob's families forgetting them, records burning in unseen fires across the county, bloodlines withering like blighted crops. As dawn crept over the hills, painting the fog in pink hues, only Thorn remained, kneeling in defeat amid the bodies and dust of his followers. The sisters, battered and bruised, bloodied but unbroken, stood over him and pronounced the final hex. "Your bloodline ends here, erased from time. Wander as shadows forgotten by all, your name a whisper lost to the wind." Thorn fled into the dissipating fog, his cries echoing faintly, but the curse clung like burrs, ensuring his fate. In the aftermath, the hauntings began with subtle insidiousness. Villagers in Ozark reported screams from the wanderer hollow at night, like those rumored from Windyville's abandoned cannery where ghosts of overworked laborers still toiled. Families who had joined the mob or spoken against the sisters vanished one by one. Homes found empty at dawn, meals untouched. Footprints leading to sinkholes like Devil's Den, where the earth opened like a maw to swallow them. Records in the Jasper County Courthouse faded inexplicably, ink dissolving as if never penned, pages turning blank under clerks' bewildered gazes. The sisters themselves transformed under the curse's backwash, their power amplified but their humanity eroded. Eliza became one with the woods, her form shifting like the legendary Mother Redcap, a shapeshifter who appeared as crone or maiden to waylay travelers. She wandered the forests, her presence felt in rustling leaves and sudden chills, cursing those who harmed the land. Abigail's voice echoed eternally in the winds, a haunting melody that drove the guilty mad, songs that cursed eavesdroppers with insomnia or planted doubts that unraveled marriages. Clara's visions manifested as apparitions, luminous figures that lured the guilty to their doom, sinkholes or cliffs where they fell screaming into oblivion. Years passed in a spectral limbo, the curse spreading like ripples in a pond. By 1895, the wanderer name was but a faint whisper among the eldest hillfolk, their cabin overgrown with vines that bloomed blood, red flowers out of season. Thorn, driven mad, wandered the ghost towns like a villa, haunted by Rotten Johnny's curse in his dreams. Visions of his skull hung on a death tree, pecked by crows. The erasure extended, whole bloodlines withered, children born without knowledge of ancestors, family Bibles pages blank where names should be. The narrative deepens with chilling moments layered upon one another: a child finding a forgotten knot, cord in the woods, untying it innocently to release a phantom scream that echoed for days. A hunter spotting three shadowy women around a distant fire, their laughter turning to wails as he approached, vanishing when he drew near. The curse's tendrils reached beyond the Ozarks, erasing maps in distant libraries, folklore twisting in oral traditions to forget the details, leaving only vague warnings. In one vivid, heart-pounding scene, a surviving mob member's wife labored in childbirth, her screams echoing Clara's prophetic visions. The babe emerged stillborn, its tiny form dissolving to dust before her eyes, a symbol of lineage erased. Another man gazed into his mirror one morning, watching his reflection fade gradually, features blurring until nothing stared back, a metaphor for existential oblivion, driving him to leap into the White River's depths. The part culminates in the sisters' final vanishing on a full moon night years later. They walked hand in hand into the thickest fog, their forms dissolving like smoke into the air. But their curse lingered eternally, a haunting presence that erased histories, leaving the Ozarks forever scarred with unspoken dread and the weight of forgotten sins. To truly grasp the chilling depths of the Wanderer sisters' curse, we must delve into the historical and cultural tapestry of the Missouri Ozarks in 1890, a land steeped in folklore, where fact and legend intertwined like roots in rocky soil, creating a fertile ground for tales of erasure and haunting. This era marked a pivotal transition. The Ozarks, once a rugged frontier settled by Europeans from the 1750s onward, were evolving under the pressures of industrialization and cultural fusion. By the late 1800s, towns like Ozark, Missouri, bustled with nascent commerce, the county courthouse standing proud with its clock tower tolling hours, newspapers like the Ozark Tribune printing local scandals, hotels accommodating travelers on stagecoaches, and saloons where whiskey fueled tall tales. Railroads like the Frisco Line, completed in 1883, began scarring the landscape, bringing timber barons and miners who exploited the forests and lead deposits, transforming quiet hollows into hubs of activity. Yet, in the remote hollows far from these centers, life clung tenaciously to pre-industrial rhythms, isolation breeding a rich tapestry of superstitions that echoed centuries-old traditions from Europe, Native America, and Africa. The region's history provides an eerie backdrop. The Ozarks were originally inhabited by indigenous tribes such as the Osage, who hunted the hills, and the Cherokee, who passed through on the Trail of Tears in the 1830s. Their forced removals left ghostly echoes, legends of wandering spirits cursing the land, sinkholes like portals to the underworld where the dispossessed returned as wraiths to claim settlers. European settlers, arriving in waves from 1750 to 1880, brought a melange of folklore, Scotch, Irish ballads of banshees and fairies adapted to local ghosts, German hexerei with protective signs painted on barns, Irish pishigas involving curses with eggs or knots, African influences carried by enslaved people who escaped into the hills during the antebellum period or freed after the Civil War, added layers of hoodoo and root work, using High John the Conqueror root for power, mojo bags for protection, or crossroads rituals for deals with spirits. This cultural syncretism created a unique Ozark magic, where Christian prayers blended with pagan rites, as documented in Vance Randolph's seminal Ozark Magic and Folklore 1947, based on oral histories from the era. The 1890s saw intense exploitation of the forest's 1880-1920 timber boom, loggers stripping hills of virgin timber, leaving scarred earth that locals believed angered the land's spirits, leading to increased reports of hauntings. Ghost towns proliferated. Winderville, with its haunted cannery where mechanical echoes mimicked human cries, a villa cursed by the legend of Rotten Johnny Reb, a Civil War soldier whose skull was hung on a death tree as a warning his ghost-seeking vengeance. Hornet Spooklight, a mysterious orb documented since the 1880s, appearing on gravel roads to lead travelers to doom, perhaps bore lightning or willow, the wisps, but interpreted as witch fire. These places mirrored the wanderer's theme of erasure, communities vanishing as economic shifts occurred, Records lost in courthouse fires, like the 1889 blaze in Carthage, or floods along rivers like the Spring. Folklore of witches and curses was rampant and vivid. Ozark, granny women, or yarb doctors, like the Wanderers, were respected healers using local flora, sassafras for blood purification, ginseng for vitality, but feared as witches if outcomes soared. Randolph details initiations the toad bone rite, where a toad is killed, its flesh stripped, and the bone floated in a stream to grant power, selling one's soul at midnight crossroads, firing silver bullets at the moon to seal pacts, reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards to summon the devil. Curses were elaborate. Witch balls made with victims' hair, nails, and blood, thrown into fires to cause illness, not tying in cords to bind enemies' actions, each not a specific woe: lameness, blindness, muteness. Protections abounded: horseshoes, nailed points up to catch luck, haint blue paint on porches to confuse ghosts, blue mimicking water they couldn't cross, Bibles under pillows to ward nightmares, or silver dimes in shoes to detect witches. Superstitions governed daily life with eerie precisions. Spilling salt invited the devil, countered by throwing a pinch over the left shoulder. A black cat crossing paths meant restarting journeys. Moon phases timed activities. Planting by waxing moon for growth, cursing by waning for diminution. Pregnancy lore was rich. Swinging a needle on thread over the belly to divine gender, circle for girl, line for boy, herbal teas for easy labor, but warnings against stepping over brooms lest the child be lazy. Vanishing legends were commonplace, blending fact with folklore. The Holloway family in 1860 disappeared during a blizzard, cabins found with fires still burning but no trace. The Proots in 1776, a Revolutionary-era clan swallowed by the hills amid Indian skirmishes, their fate unknown. Underwater towns like those flooded by 1950s dams, e.g. Table Rock Lake, but in 1890, stories of entire settlements erased by plagues or feuds. The Bell Witch of Tennessee influenced Ozark tales, with poltergeists tormenting families until they fled, names forgotten. Cultural trauma amplified the eerie atmosphere. The Civil War 1865 left deep scars in Missouri, a border state torn by guerrilla warfare, bushwhackers like Quantrill's raiders burning towns, families divided, ghosts of hanged men swinging from trees. Post-war reconstruction brought economic hardships, timber booms leading to busts, famines in poor soil, diseases like cholera sweeping hollows. This bred scapegoating, witches blamed for failed crops, sick livestock, or vanished children. Women like the Wanderers, independent and knowledgeable, threatened patriarchal norms, echoing European witch hunts, but in rural American isolation, accusations often stemming from jealousy or failed courtships. Blending fact and folklore creates an unsettling authenticity. Real places like Devil's Den near Cassville, a massive sinkhole seen as a hell portal, fueled tales of vanishings into the earth. The Blue Man, reported in the 1860s as a giant throwing rocks, symbolized nature's curse on intruders, perhaps based on Bigfoot-like sightings or escaped slaves hiding in caves. In this context, the Wanderer's story feels not just possible but inevitable, a curse born of societal fears, erasing those who defied norms. Much like how history often forgets the marginalized, their contributions buried, shadows lingering in cultural memory. Educational yet haunting, it serves as a cautionary tale. The past traumas, if ignored, return to haunt, erasing the unwary from the narrative of time. Beyond the surface chills and narrative twists of the Wanderer sisters' tale lies a profound labyrinth of symbolic, psychological, and thematic depths, connecting this Ozark legend to universal fears, cultural traumas, and the darkest recesses of human nature. This story isn't mere folklore or gothic entertainment. It's a multifaceted mirror reflecting our collective shadows, where curses symbolize the systematic erasure of inconvenient truths, marginalized voices, and uncomfortable histories. By dissecting its layers with an ominous, intellectual lens, we uncover how it resonates across time, leaving listeners haunted by its implications. Symbolically, the sisters embody repressed female agency and empowerment in a patriarchal world. In the 1890s Ozarks, women like granny witches wielded autonomous power through esoteric knowledge, healing with herbs, divining futures, cursing foes, challenging the male-dominated structures of church, family, and community. Their curse of erasure mirrors how history has systematically silenced women, records expunged, contributions attributed to men, names faded from genealogies. The knot cords Abigail ties symbolize societal constraints binding women, marriage, motherhood, subservience. Untying them unleashes chaos, a metaphor for feminist rebellion against oppression. The witch bottle Clara hurls represents bottled-up rage, shattering to release pent-up traumas. The fog that engulfs the mob symbolizes ambiguity and the unknown, the gray areas where truth is lost, reflecting how societies obscure injustices. Psychologically, the tale taps into Carl Jung's archetypes and Sigmund Freud's theories of the unconscious. The sisters represent the anima, the feminine aspect of the male psyche, mysterious, intuitive, and feared, manifesting as witches in collective dreams. The mob, led by Thorn, embodies the shadow self-repressed guilt, violence, and prejudice projected onto outsiders. Thorn's accusation stems from his own domestic abuse, a Freudian displacement where personal trauma is externalized as supernatural blame. The vanishings depict repression mechanisms, denied memories buried in the unconscious only to resurface as hauntings, ghosts as metaphors for unresolved guilt. Clara's visions align with precognition or clairvoyance, exploring the psyche's ability to transcend time, a nod to parapsychology's exploration of the mind's hidden powers. Universal fears are woven throughout, amplifying the chill. The Ozarks' isolation evokes agoraphobia and claustrophobia simultaneously, vast wilderness yet confining hollows, symbolizing existential loneliness. The erasure curse taps into thanatophobia, fear of death, extended to oblivion, not just dying, but being forgotten, legacies dissolved like ink in water. This resonates with modern anxieties in a digital age, data deletions, cancelled cultures where one tweet can erase a reputation. The spook light and sinkholes represent the unknown's terror, the abyss staring back. As Nietzsche warned, where venturing too deep risks consumption. Cultural trauma underpins the narrative, reflecting generational wounds. The Ozarks bear scars of colonialism, indigenous displacements, via the Trail of Tears, leaving cursed lands where spirits seek retribution. The sisters' mixed heritage, European, African, native influences, symbolizes America's melting pot as a cauldron of conflict, where blended cultures breed powerful but persecuted figures. The Civil War's legacy of division and violence mirrors family feuds in the tale. Curses as metaphors for inherited trauma passed down bloodlines. Erasure connects to historical amnesia, forgotten atrocities like slavery's horrors or native genocides, scrubbed from textbooks, lingering as cultural ghosts. The story critiques how societies erase inconvenient narratives to maintain power, akin to Orwell's 1984, where history is rewritten. Human nature's darker facets are laid bare. The mob's fury illustrates scapegoating. Milgram's obedience experiments in folklore form, ordinary men turning monstrous under group pressure and authority, the Thorn as instigator. The sisters' retaliation highlights vengeance's vicious cycle, how oppression breeds resistance that can turn equally destructive. Yet, there's ambiguity. Are the wanderers victims or villains? This moral grayness probes ethical relativism, curses as justice or excess, echoing debates in philosophy from Kant's categorical imperatives to Nietzsche's will to power. Thematically, the tale explores memory versus forgetting, curses as mechanisms to preserve truth by erasing falsehoods, or vice versa. It connects to universal myths like the Greek fates cutting life's threads or Celtic banshees wailing for the doomed. In a broader sense, it warns of environmental curses, the exploited Ozarks fighting back through legends, a prescient eco-horror for our climate era. Ominously, this analysis invites self-reflection. How do we contribute to erasures in our lives? Ignoring histories, silencing voices, the wanderer's shadow may fall on us, a lingering question that haunts long after the story ends. As our extended immersion into the tale of the Wanderer sisters draws to its shadowed close, we're left with the profound chill of unresolved dread, a narrative that lingers like fog in the hollows. In the autumn of 1890, amid the Missouri Ozarks' mist-shrouded hills, Their haunting curse erased not just lives but entire legacies. Bloodlines vanishing like whispers in the wind, histories scrubbed from the annals of time as if by an invisible hand, yet the echoes persist, spectral sobs in the night, apparitions flickering at the edge of vision, a testament that some shadows defy obliteration, clawing back from the void. Reflecting on the saga, we see the sisters not as mere witches, but as archetypes of the forgotten, their curse a metaphor for the land's vengeance against intruders who despoiled and divided. Eliza Abigail and Clara, guardians of ancient ways, faced a world that feared their power, leading to a confrontation that rippled through generations. The mob's fall, Thorne's madness, the vanishings, all weave a tapestry of terror that questions our own complicity in erasure. What lingers most is the enigmatic question: was the curse their deliberate invocation, or an awakening of the Ozarks' primordial wrath, stirred by centuries of displacement and exploitation? In ghost towns like Avila or Winterville, where ruins whisper secrets, modern hikers in 2025 still report uncanny phenomena, unseen footsteps pacing theirs, names called in familiar voices that fade to nothing, paths that loop endlessly until dawn breaks the spell. Perhaps the sisters wander yet, their ethereal forms traversing the bluffs, waiting to ensnare those who forget the lessons of the past. Dear listeners, as you extinguish your lights and settle into the quiet, attune your ears to the subtleties. Is that merely the wind rustling leaves, or a sister's sigh brushing your neck? The creak of floorboards, settling house or spectral steps. The shadow behind you might just be your own. Or theirs, a reminder that history's erased pages can rewrite themselves in blood. Until our next descent into the shadows, remember, some chronicles are expunged, but never truly extinguished. They wait, patient as the earth, to haunt anew.